The wind came low and restless across the Arizona plains, dragging dust like ghosts over the hard-baked earth. It carried with it the smell of horses, leather, and something else, something like trouble waiting just beyond the horizon. Caleb Turner sat tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the sun, narrowed as he scanned the distant ridgeline. He had spent most of his life riding these lands, driving cattle, breaking horses, sleeping under cold stars, but today, the land felt different. Tense. Behind him, the Barrow Ranch stretched, wide fences creaking, cattle lowing, men working like shadows against the gold-burned fields. It was a hard life, but it was honest. And for men like Caleb, that was enough. Until that morning, they're bringing her through town. One of the ranch hands had said over coffee, his voice low like he didn't want the sky to hear. Apache woman, caught near the northern ridge. Sheriff says she's trouble. Caleb hadn't answered then. But now, riding toward the small town of Red Hollow, the words stayed with him. Trouble. He'd seen trouble before. Trouble usually wore a gun, rode fast, and left blood behind. But something about the way the man had said, Apache woman, set wrong in his chest. Red Hollow appeared slowly, rising out of the dust like a stubborn thought. Wooden buildings leaned against time. The saloon doors swung lazily, and a handful of townsfolk gathered in the street like vultures circling. Something already decided. Caleb tied his horse to the post and stepped into the heat of the moment. She's right there, someone muttered. Two deputies stood near the center of town, rifles resting easy in their hands. Between them stood a woman. Her hands were bound. Her hair, black as midnight, hung loose over her shoulders. Her skin carried the bronze of sun and survival, marked with faint lines of dust and defiance. But it was her eyes that stopped Caleb cold. They weren't afraid. They were furious. She crossed into ranchland. The sheriff barked, pacing in front of the gathered crowd. Spooked livestock. Nearly caused a stampede. We can't have that. Not with everything already on edge. She ain't done nothing. A voice called weakly, but it was swallowed by louder murmurs. She's Apache. That's enough. Send her back. Or worse. The woman said nothing. She stood straight despite the rope biting into her wrists. Her chin lifted like she refused to bow, not to the sheriff, not to the town, not to anyone. Caleb felt something tighten inside him. She'll be banished, the sheriff declared. Driven past the southern ridge. If she returns, it'll be the rope. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Banished. Like she wasn't human. Like she was something to be chased off. Caleb stepped forward before he realized he was moving. That don't seem right. The town went quiet. The sheriff turned slowly. You got something to say, Turner? Caleb shrugged slightly, his voice calm but steady. I seen cattle spook at shadows. Don't mean the shadows guilty. Few men shifted uncomfortably. The sheriff's eyes hardened. You calling my judgment wrong? I'm saying maybe you're too quick to make it. Silence stretched thin as wire. Then the woman spoke. Her voice was low, controlled, but strong enough to cut through everything. I did not harm your cattle. Every eye turned to her. I was searching, she continued, for my brother. He is wounded. I followed tracks. That is all. Eyes, someone muttered. But Caleb didn't look away from her. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated only a moment. Ayanna. The name settled into the air like something sacred. Caleb nodded once. I believe her, the sheriff scoffed. You believe her? Based on what? Caleb met his gaze. Same thing you're judging her on. Instinct. That didn't go over well. This ain't your concern. Turner, the sheriff snapped. It is if you're about to run an innocent woman into the desert to die. Gasps whispered through the crowd. The sheriff stepped closer, voice low. You want to make this your fight? Caleb didn't hesitate. Looks like I already have. The tension thickened. Finally, the sheriff straightened, letting out a breath. Fine. You care so much she's your responsibility. You take her. You answer for whatever trouble she brings. A murmur swept the crowd again, this time sharper, more uncertain. Caleb stepped forward, cutting the rope from Ayanna's wrists himself. She didn't flinch, didn't thank him either, but when her eyes met his, something shifted just slightly. Come on, he said quietly. They walked past the crowd together, whispers trailing behind them like shadows. Crazy fool. She'll get him killed. Should've let her go. Caleb didn't look back. They reached his horse, and he paused. You ride? Ayanna gave a faint nod. He helped her up, then mounted behind her, guiding the horse away from the town and into the open land. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant storms. Finally, Ayanna broke the silence. Why? Caleb shifted slightly. Why what? Why did you help me? He thought about it, then said simply, because no one else did. She was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't distant. It was something else. Something closer. As the sun began to dip, painting the land in fire and gold, Caleb realized something he hadn't expected. This wasn't just trouble, this was the beginning of something that would change everything. And somewhere far behind them, in the dusty heart of Red Hollow, men were already deciding what to do about the cowboy who defied them all. The sun sank slowly behind the jagged Arizona ridges, bleeding orange and crimson across the sky as Caleb guided the horse deeper into the open wilderness. The land stretched endlessly, dry and tamed, and unforgiving. It was the kind of place that didn't forgive mistakes, and Caleb knew he had just made a big one. Ayanna sat in front of him, her posture straight despite the long ride, her presence calm yet alert like a hawk riding the wind. She hadn't spoken again after asking him why he helped her, and Caleb didn't push. Something told him she wasn't a woman who trusted easily. Truth be told, neither was he. You said your brother's hurt, Caleb finally said as the light began to fade. Where'd you last see him? Ayanna didn't turn around, but her voice came steady. Near Blackstone Ridge, 2 days' ride from here. Caleb let out a slow breath. That wasn't just far, it was dangerous. Blackstone Ridge wasn't just another stretch of desert. It was rough terrain, filled with jagged cliffs, narrow passes, and men who didn't like witnesses. Outlaws. You think he's still there? Caleb asked. I know he is, she replied. There was no hesitation in her voice. No doubt. Caleb studied her profile quietly. The fading sunlight traced the sharp lines of her face, the quiet strength in her eyes. She wasn't guessing, she believed it, and somehow, Caleb found himself believing it too. We'll make camp soon, he said. Horse needs rest. Ayanna nodded once. They found a small clearing nestled between weathered rock formations, a place just hidden enough to offer some protection from the open land. Caleb dismounted first, then helped her down. She didn't lean on him, didn't falter. Even after everything, she carried herself like someone who refused to be broken. Caleb unsaddled the horse, letting it graze what little scrub it could find, then started a small fire. The flames flickered to life, pushing back the creeping darkness. For a while, they moved in silence, until, you don't trust me. The words came from Ayanna, soft, but sharp. Caleb paused, then gave a half smile. That obvious? She finally turned to face him fully. You watch me like I might disappear, or attack. He shrugged lightly. Out here, you learn to expect both. Ayanna stepped closer to the firelight. The glow caught in her eyes, reflecting something deeper than anger. Now, you took me from people who would have killed me, she said. But you still see me as danger. Caleb met her gaze. I see everyone as danger. That hung between them. Then, slowly, Ayanna reached down and pulled something from beneath the folds of her clothing. A knife. Caleb's body tensed instinctively, his hand hovering near his holster, but he didn't draw. Ayanna noticed, and without breaking eye contact, she stepped forward and handed him the knife, handle first. If I wished you harm, she said quietly, I would not wait until you sleep. The fire crackled. Caleb stared at the blade in his hand, then back at her. Something shifted again. He exhaled, easing slightly. Fair point. He handed it back. This time, when their fingers brushed briefly, neither pulled away too fast. Ayanna sat near the fire, wrapping her arms loosely around her knees. My brother. His name is Dakota. He was shot. Caleb's expression darkened. By who? Men on horses. Not Apache. Not soldiers either. She looked at him. Your kind. Caleb frowned. That don't narrow it down much. They were hunting something, she continued. Or someone. My brother saw them, and they did not want witnesses. A chill crept into the night air. Caleb leaned back slightly, thinking. Outlaws, maybe. Blackstone Ridge is crawling with them. Yes, Ayanna said. That is why I must find him before they do. Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word, but she hit it. Well, Caleb noticed anyway. You won't find him alone, he said quietly. She didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence said enough. After a moment, Caleb stood and walked to his saddlebag, pulling out a small cloth bundle. He returned and tossed it lightly toward her. She caught it. Inside was food, dried meat, a bit of bread. Ayanna looked at it, then at him. You share your food with danger? She asked. Caleb smirked faintly. Only the kind that hands me back a knife. For the first time, something close to a smile touched her lips, small, but real. They ate in quiet companionship, the fire dancing between them, the vast desert stretching endlessly beyond. But peace in the Wild West never lasted long. Caleb heard it first, hoofbeats, distant, but fast. He froze. Ayanna's head snapped up, her senses just as sharp. How many? She whispered. Caleb listened carefully. At least 4, maybe more. Ayanna was already on her feet, eyes scanning the darkness. Not random riders, she said. They follow. Caleb cursed under his breath. Town didn't waste time. He moved quickly, kicking dirt over the fire to dim its glow. We can't outrun them in the dark, he said. Not without risking the cliffs. Then we fight, Ayanna replied. Caleb looked at, really look this time, no fear, no hesitation. Just resolve. He gave a slow nod. All right then. He handed her a spare revolver from his saddlebag. She examined it briefly. Unfamiliar, but not unsure. I prefer a bow, she said. Make do tonight. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. Shapes began to emerge in the darkness, riders silhouetted against the faint moonlight. A voice called out, Turner, we know you're out there. Caleb stepped forward slightly, gun at his side. Go on home, he shouted back. Ain't your concern no more, Rafter echoed. Sheriff says it is. Says you've gone and lost your mind. Another rider added, hand her over. Caleb, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Caleb's jaw tightened. Behind him, Ayanna moved silently, positioning herself near the rocks. Ready. Always ready. She ain't going anywhere. Caleb called out. A pause. Then, your funeral. Gunfire exploded through the night. The world shattered into chaos. Caleb dove behind cover, returning fire with sharp precision. Bullets sparked against rock, dust flying as the riders circled. Ayanna moved like the wind, fast, silent, deadly. She fired carefully, not wasting a single shot. One rider screamed as he fell from his horse. Another pulled back, startled. They're fighting back. Someone yelled. Caleb smirked grimly. Damn right we are. But they were outnumbered, and the riders were spreading out, trying to flank the. Ayanna ducked beside Caleb, her breathing steady. They will surround us. Yeah, Caleb muttered. Figured that part. Another shot rang out closer this time. Too close. Caleb turned and saw one rider charging straight toward Ayanna from the side. Look out. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, tackling her to the ground just as the rider fired. The bullet tore through Caleb's shoulder. Pain exploded. Ayanna gasped, her hands gripping him as they hit the dirt. For a moment, everything blurred. Sound faded, then came rushing back. Caleb, she shouted. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself up despite the burning pain. I'm fine. He wasn't. Blood seeped through his shirt. The riders were regrouping, closing in. Ayanna looked at him, really looked this time, and something changed in her expression. Not just trust. Something deeper, something dangerous. You should have let me fall, she said. Softly, Caleb shook his head, breathing hard. Not a chance. The next wave of riders moved in, and this time, there would be no holding back. The night had turned savage. Gunfire cracked through the darkness, echoing off the rocks like thunder, trapped between canyon walls. The air smelled of burning powder and dust, thick enough to choke on. Caleb's shoulder burned with every movement, blood soaking through his shirt. But he didn't let himself slow down, not now. Not when they were closing in. Ayanna was no longer just surviving, she was fighting like something born of the land itself. Her movements were precise, silent between shots, every step calculated. The revolver in her hand bucked with unfamiliar weight, but she adapted fast for someone who had never used one before. They're splitting, she called out. Caleb wiped sweat and blood from his brow, squinting through the darkness. Yeah, trying to box us in. Another bullet slammed into the rock inches from his head. Damn it. He leaned out, fired once clean, controlled, and a rider dropped from his saddle with a grunt. The remaining men hesitated, but only for a moment. They're desperate, Caleb muttered. Means they've got reason. Ayanna glanced at him. Or fear. Before Caleb could answer, a shout rang out from the ridge above them. Enough. Everything stilled for half a heartbeat. A new figure emerged on horseback at the top of the slope, silhouetted by moonlight. He sat tall, confident, like a man who believed the world already belonged to him. Caleb's jaw tightened instantly. Well, that explains it. Ayanna's gaze sharpened. You know him. Unfortunately, the rider nudged his horse forward slightly, revealing more of his face, sharp features, cold eyes, a smile that didn't reach anywhere near them. Ethan and Caleb, the man called down casually. You always did have a habit of picking the wrong fights, Evanan. Wyatt, Caleb shot back, voice edged with something darker now. Didn't figure you'd be dumb enough to chase me this far. Wyatt chuckled. Oh, I'm here for you. His gaze slid to Ayanna, and lingered. Something cold passed through Caleb's chest. You've got something that don't belong to you, Wyatt continued. And I'd like it back. Ayanna frowned slightly. I carry nothing of yours. Wyatt smiled wider. Not yet, you don't. Caleb's grip on his gun tightened. Spit it out, Wyatt. The man sighed dramatically, like he was tired of explaining simple things. There's a man hiding out near Blackstone Ridge. Injured. Apache. Ayanna's breath caught just barely. Wyatt noticed. He said softly. There it is. Caleb stepped slightly in front of her. You're hunting her brother. I'm hunting something he has, Wyatt corrected. Something valiant. Ayanna's voice cut through, sharp as steel. He has nothing. Wyatt tilted his head. Oh, but he does. And you're going to help me find it. Silence stretched tight. Then Caleb laughed low. Humorless. That's not happening. Wyatt's expression didn't change. But something darker flickered beneath the surface. You sure about that? He asked quietly. He lifted his hand slightly, and suddenly more riders emerged from the shadows behind him. Not 4, 5. At least a dozen. Caleb's stomach dropped. They had been outplayed. They were never trying to surround us, Caleb muttered under his breath. They were hurting us. Ayanna's eyes flicked to him. Into a trap. Yeah. Wyatt leaned forward in his saddle. Here's how this goes. You hand her over, Caleb, and I might let you walk away. Caleb didn't even hesitate. No, Ayanna looked at him, really looked this time, and whatever she saw there made her expression shift. Wyatt sighed again, clearly disappointed. You always were stubborn. His hand dropped. Kill him. The night exploded again. But this time, it was worse. Too many guns. Too many angles. Caleb fired, ducked, moved, but his shoulder slowed him. Every shot sent pain ripping through him, making his aim just a fraction less steady. Ayanna saw it. You cannot fight like this, she said urgently. Watch. He grunted, but even he knew the truth. They wouldn't survive this head-on. Ayanna's eyes scanned the terrain rapidly, the rocks, the shadows, the narrow gap between two jagged formations behind them. There, she said suddenly. A path. Caleb followed her gaze. A tight passage. Barely visible. Risky, but better than staying. You lead, he said. Ayanna didn't argue. She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the gap as bullets tore into the ground around them. Caleb covered their movement, firing back just enough to keep the riders cautious. They reached the passage just as another volley hit the rocks behind them. The world narrowed instantly. The path was tight, too tight for horses. Good. That would slow their pursuers. They stumbled forward, breath heavy, footsteps uneven over loose stone. The darkness closed in around them, broken only by slivers of moonlight. Above, behind them, shouts echoed. They're running. After them. Caleb stumbled slightly. Ayanna caught him. You are losing blood, she said. Her voice tight now. I noticed, he muttered. They pushed deeper until the sounds of pursuit grew faint. Only then did Ayanna stop. This will hold them. For a time, Caleb leaned heavily against the rock wall, breathing hard. The adrenaline was fading now, and the pain was rushing in to take its place. Ayanna moved quickly, tearing a strip from her clothing. Sit. I'm fine, sit. Something in her tone made him listen. He slid down against the rock, jaw clenched. Ayanna knelt beside him, her hand steady as she pressed the cloth against his wound. Caleb hissed in pain. You've got a gentle touch. She ignored the comment, focused entirely. You saved me, she said quietly as she worked. You should not have. Caleb let out a weak chuckle. You keep saying that. You risk your life for someone you do not know. He looked at her, really looked. I know enough. She paused. Enough for what? Caleb's voice softened. Despite everything. Enough to know you didn't deserve what they were gonna do to you. Ayanna's hand slowed slightly. For a moment. The world outside, the danger, the pursuit, the blood dash faded. It was just the two of them, close, too close. You are different, she said. Caleb smirked faintly. Don't spread that around. Ruins my reputation. Ayanna almost smiled again. Almost. But then her expression shifted. Serious. There is more you should know. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Always is, my brother. She hesitated, then continued. He carries something. Not gold, not money. Caleb frowned. Then what's Wyatt after? Ayanna met his eyes. A map. That got his full attention. To what? He asked. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. To land. My people were forced to leave. Silence hit hard. Caleb leaned back slightly, processing. That ain't just valuable, he said slowly. That's dangerous. Yes. And Wyatt wants it. Yes. Caleb let out a long breath. Well, he muttered, guess I really picked a side now. Ayanna studied him carefully. You can still leave, she said. This is not your fight. Caleb looked at her, then shook his head. It is now. Something in her eyes shifted again. Deeper. Warmer. But also heavier. Because now, they both knew what was coming. Wyatt wouldn't stop. Not for anything. And somewhere out there, in the unforgiving land near Blackstone Ridge, her brother was waiting, wounded, alone, and carrying something men were willing to kill for. Caleb pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain. Come on, he said. We keep moving before they find another way around. Ayanna nodded. This time, when she moved beside him, she didn't keep her distance. And for the first time since this began, neither of them felt alone. The canyon path narrowed even further as they moved deeper into the jagged heart of the land. Above them, the night sky was a fractured ribbon of stars, barely visible through the stone walls that closed in like the jaws of some ancient beast. Every step echoed faintly like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Caleb's strength was fading. He tried not to show it, but Ayanna noticed anyway. You are slowing, she said quietly. I'm walking just fine, he lied. Ayanna didn't argue. She simply moved closer to his side, close enough that if he stumbled, she could catch him. That small act said more than words ever could. After a long stretch of silence, they finally emerged into a wider basin carved between cliffs. A small stretch of pale moonlight spilled across the ground, revealing dry brush and a shallow stream cutting through stone. Water. Caleb exhaled in relief. We rest here, Ayanna nodded, already scanning the perimeter. Old habits. Survival instincts. But something about the place felt wrong. Caleb felt it too. Still, they needed water, needed rest. There was no choice. He knelt by the stream, splashing cool water over his face, letting it wash away dust and blood. Ayanna stayed standing, watching the ridge lines above them, like she expected the land to betray them. You never stop watching, Caleb said without looking up. In my world, she replied. Stopping means death. Caleb glanced at her. Same in mine. That earned him a brief look, something like acknowledgement. But then Ayanna froze. Caleb noticed instantly. What? She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly raised her hand, signaling silence. Caleb went still. Then he heard it. Not gunfire, not horses. Drums. Distant. Low, rhythmic. Caleb's blood turned cold. That ain't Wyatt's men. Ayanna's eyes were fixed on the ridge. No, pause. Then she said it. Barely audible. One. People. The wind shifted, and suddenly, figures appeared along the cliffs above them. Dozens. Maybe more. Silhouettes against the moonlight, silent. Still. Watching. Caleb slowly stood. Hands open, but ready. Ayanna, talk to them. She stepped forward slightly, her voice rising into the night in a language Caleb didn't understand. Strong, clear, emotional. One of the figures above responded, then another. The tension in the air changed immediately. Not softer, stranger, or complicated. Ayanna lowered her voice. When she turned back to Caleb, they are not here for me. Caleb frowned. Then why are they here? Before she could answer, a figure descended the cliff path, a man, older, decorated with painted markings, his expression carved from stone and grief. He stopped a few paces away, his eyes locked on Ayanna, then moved to Caleb. You bring outsider, the man said in broken English. Ayanna stepped forward. He saved my life. The elder's expression did not change. Outsiders bring chains. Caleb's jaw tightened. I ain't anyone's chain. The man ignored him completely. Instead, he spoke to Ayanna again, faster now, more urgent in her language. Her face shifted as she listened. Fear, then anger, then something like heartbreak. When he finished, silence swallowed everything. Caleb stepped closer. What did he say? Ayanna didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter than he had ever heard it. My brother is not only wounded. Caleb felt the shift before she even finished. He has been taken, she said. The world seemed to stop. By Wyatt? Caleb asked. Ayanna shook her head slowly. Oh, a pause. Then, by my own people. Caleb stared at her. That don't make sense. The elder spoke again, sharply. Ayanna translated, her voice strained. They say he betrayed the tribe, that he carried forbidden knowledge, that he would give it to outsiders. Caleb shook his head immediately. That's not true. I know, she whispered, but doubt had already begun to creep in, not into her voice, but into her world. The elder stepped forward. He looked at Caleb with something colder than hatred. Outsider must leave, he said firmly. This land is not yours. Ayanna stepped between them. He is with me. The elder's eyes hardened. Then you choose exile with him. That hit like a gunshot. Caleb saw it in her face, the impossible weight pressing down on her. Her people, her brother, her survival, and now him. Everything pulling her apart in different directions. Ayanna turned slightly toward Caleb, and for the first time she looked uncertain. You should go, she said quietly. Caleb blinked. What? This is not your war, she repeated. Caleb let out a sharp breath. You've been saying that since I met you. Ain't stopped me yet. This is different, she said, voice breaking slightly. If I stay with you, they will turn against me. I will lose everything. Caleb stepped closer. You already lost your brother. You gonna lose him more by walking away from him now? That silenced her. The wind moved through the canyon, carrying distant echoes of drums and something heavier. Decision. Caleb lowered his voice. Look at me. Ayanna hesitated, then did. I didn't drag you out of that town just to watch you get swallowed by every side that wants to own you, he said. If your brother's alive, we find him. If Wyatt's behind it, we deal with him. And if your people don't like it, he shrugged slightly, wincing from the pain in his shoulder, they'll have to get in line. Ayanna's eyes trembled slightly. The elder spoke again, more forceful this time. Ayanna translated without turning away from Caleb. They say if you go with me now, you will be hunted by my tribe and by Wyatt. Both. Caleb gave a faint, tired smile. Already am. That landed differently, even. The elder went quiet. Ayanna looked at Caleb for a long moment. Something broke and something else formed in its place. She turned to her people, then spoke firmly, a choice, a declaration. When she finished, the silence that followed was absolute. The elder's expression darkened, but he did not attack. Instead, he turned sharply and disappeared into the cliffs. The others followed, one by one, leaving only wind behind. Caleb exhaled slowly. That didn't sound like a good thing. Ayanna watched them go, then finally said, I have chosen. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Chosen what? She turned to him, and this time, there was no hesitation in her eyes. You. The word hit heavier than gunfire. For a moment, Caleb didn't know what to say. So he just nodded slightly. All right then. But far away beyond the canyon, beyond the ridge, a rider watched everything from the shadows. Wyatt. And he smiled. Because now, the hunt had become personal. The canyon winds shifted after the tribe disappeared into the cliffs, leaving only silence behind, heavy and uneasy silence. Like the land itself had made a decision it could not take back. Ayanna stood still for a long time. Caleb watched her, not speaking, because something in her had changed. Not broken, lost, but reshaped. Finally, she turned away from the empty ridge and walked toward the stream. She knelt, scooped water into her hands, and let it run through her fingers like she was trying to wash away the weight of everything that had just happened. I have no home now, she said quietly. Caleb didn't hesitate. That ain't true. She gave a faint, humorless laugh. My tribe says I am exile. My brother is taken. The man who saved me is now hunted by everyone. Caleb stepped closer, wincing slightly as pain still throbbed through his shoulder. Sounds like you've got options. Just none of them good. That earned the smallest glance from her. He continued, voice lower now. Out here, most folks don't get a home. They just find places they can stand long enough to breathe. Ayanna studied him. And you? Where do you stand, Caleb Turner? That question lingered. Caleb looked out across the canyon. I used to think I stood on the right side of things, he said slowly. Ranch life, law, order. Keep your head down. Do your work. Don't ask too many questions. He paused, then shook his head slightly. Then I met you. Ayanna didn't respond, but her eyes softened just slightly. Caleb continued. Now, not so sure there's a right side left. The night deepened around them. Somewhere far off, an owl called, echoing through the stone like a warning. Then a faint sound. Caleb froze instantly. Ayanna noticed immediately. What is it? He held up a hand. Listening, hoofbeats. Not distant this time, close. Too close. His jaw tightened. We've got company. Ayanna stood slowly, reaching instinctively for the revolver at her side. Caleb shook his head once. Not Wyatt's men. Then who? Before he could answer, a rider appeared at the edge of the basin. Alone. No weapons raised. No shouting. Just watching. He stopped a distance away. His horse breathed heavily beneath him. Caleb squinted. I know that face. The rider raised his hand slowly. Turner. Caleb's expression hardened. Marshal Briggs. Ayanna's posture shifted instantly. Lawman? Caleb nodded slightly. Used to be. The marshal dismounted slowly, boots crunching against gravel. He looked older than Caleb remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. I've been tracking you, Briggs said. Caleb snorted. That's supposed to make me feel honored? Briggs ignored the comment and glanced at Ayanna. So it's true. Caleb stepped slightly forward. Whatever you heard, it doesn't matter, Briggs cut in. The sheriff in Red Hollow is screaming for your head. Says you stole a prisoner, killed men, betrayed the town. Caleb let out a slow breath. That last one sounds a little dramatic. Briggs looked at him sharply. You shot 2 men. They shot first. That's not how the town remembers it. Silence stretched tight. Ayanna spoke quietly. They are lying. Briggs turned his gaze to her. Maybe, but lies travel faster than truth out here. Caleb rubbed his forehead. So what now? You taking me in? Briggs didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said everything. Finally, he spoke. I should. Caleb nodded. But you won't. Briggs exhaled through his nose. You always were too smart for your own good. He reached into his coat slowly. Ayanna tensed instantly. Caleb raised a hand slightly. Easy. Briggs pulled out a folded paper, tossed it to Caleb. Caleb caught it, unfolding it carefully. A wanted notice, his own face, below it Ayanna's sketch, and a third marking. Wyatt Kane. Caleb read aloud. Briggs nodded grimly. That's the part you don't understand. Wyatt isn't just some outlaw running guns near Blackstone Ridge. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Briggs continued. He's building something. A network. Arms, land deals, control of water routes. Half the territory doesn't even realize it's already being sold underneath them. Ayanna's voice cut in. And my brother? Briggs looked at her directly now. That map he carries. It leads to something bigger than land. Something every man with a gun will kill for. Caleb folded the paper slowly. So Wyatt wants it. The tribe thinks it's cursed. And we're stuck in the middle. Briggs nodded once. That about sums it up. Ayanna stepped forward. Where is my brother now? Briggs hesitated again. Then finally, Fort Hollow. Old abandoned military outpost north of Blackstone Ridge. Caleb frowned. That place is crawling with Wyatt's men. Exactly, Briggs said. Caleb looked at Ayanna. She didn't hesitate this time. We go, she said firmly. Briggs shook his head. You're walking into a war. Caleb gave a tired half smile. Feels like we already did. Briggs studied them both for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled out a spare revolver and handed it to Caleb. I can't officially help you, he said quietly, but I can make sure you don't die immediately. Caleb took it. Appreciate the optimism. Briggs mounted his horse again. Before leaving, he looked at Ayanna. There's something else you should know, he said. She narrowed her eyes. What? Briggs paused, then said it. Your brother didn't just find a map. Caleb felt a chill creep in. Briggs continued. He found proof that Wyatt Kane isn't just after land. Ayanna's voice dropped. Then what is he after? Briggs looked at both of them and answered. He's trying to start a war between tribes and settlers, so he can own whatever's left after. Silence hit like a gunshot. Then Briggs turned his horse and disappeared into the night. Caleb exhaled slowly. Well, that escalated. Ayanna didn't move. Her eyes were fixed north, toward Fort Hollow, toward her brother, toward everything waiting to collapse. We leave now, she said. Caleb nodded. Yeah, pause. Then he added quietly, and this time, we finish it. They mounted up together, rode out beneath a sky full of watching stars, not as strangers anymore, as savior and saved, but as something far more dangerous in the Wild West. A man who had already defied a town, and a woman who had already been exiled by her own people, together, heading straight into a war neither of them were meant to survive. And somewhere ahead, Wyatt Kane was already waiting. The first light of dawn broke over the northern desert like a blade cutting through black cloth. Caleb and Ayanna rode in silence. The land ahead of them was different now, no longer open freedom, but a tightening corridor of stone ridges, dead trees, and wind-carved silence. Every mile toward Fort Hollow felt heavier, like the world itself was warning them to turn back. But neither of them did. Caleb shifted in the saddle, wincing as the wound in his shoulder flared again. Blood had dried, but the pain hadn't left. It had simply become part of him now. You should rest, Ayanna said without looking at him. Caleb let out a faint, tired laugh. I'll rest when we're done. She glanced at him briefly. That may be too late. He met her eyes for a moment. Then I guess I'll just have to finish faster. Something flickered in her expression, soft, almost invisible. But it was there. As they crested a ridge, Fort Hollow finally came into view. It sat like a dead thing at the bottom of a wide basin, once a military outpost, now broken, weathered, swallowed by dust and time. The wooden watchtower still stood, but crooked. The fencing still held shape, but sagging. And moving between it all were men. Wyatt's men. Dozens of them. Caleb exhaled slowly. That's a lot more than I was hoping for. Yana's gaze locked onto the fort. My brother is there, Caleb nodded once. Then we don't leave without him. Ayana looked at him. And Wyatt? A pause. Caleb's voice hardened. We deal with him too. They dismounted a mile out, hiding the horses behind a cluster of rocks. From here, the fort looked even more like a trap waiting to close. Caleb checked his revolver. Ayana checked hers. Neither said what they both knew this was going to be blood. They moved low through the brush, using the terrain like cover. The closer they got, the more details emerged: guards on the walls, rifles slung across shoulders, men laughing near barrels of supplies like they owned the world. And then Caleb saw it. A cage, near the center yard. His jaw tightened. There, Ayana followed his gaze, and for the first time, her composure cracked. Inside the cage, barely standing, bruised and weakened Dakota, her breath stopped. Brother? She whispered. Caleb grabbed her arm gently before she could move. Not yet. She shook slightly. He is alive. Yes, Caleb said firmly. And we keep it that way by not rushing in blind. Her breathing steadied, but her eyes stayed locked on him. Then a voice behind them. Caleb spun instantly. Gun raised but stopped. Marshal Briggs stood there again, alone. Didn't think you'd make it this far, Briggs muttered. Caleb frowned. You following us or just bad at staying away? Briggs didn't answer the joke. This place is crawling with Kane's men, he said. You go in loud, you die in minutes. Ayana stepped forward. We cannot leave him. Briggs studied her, then nodded slightly. I know. He reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Ayana tensed. What is that? Briggs handed it to Caleb. Caleb unwrapped it slowly. A map. But not just any map. It was marked routes, tunnels, supply lines, and one hidden path into Fort Hollow. Caleb looked up. You planning to betray them now? Briggs shook his head. I'm planning to stop a war. Wyatt's got half the territory, convinced settlers and tribes are about to tear each other apart. He just needs that map. Your brother has to seal the deal. Ayana's voice sharpened. Then we take it from him. Briggs nodded once. That's the idea. Caleb folded the map. So what's the catch? Briggs hesitated, then said it. Wyatt is inside that fort. But he's not alone. Ayana narrowed her eyes. Who else? Briggs looked at her. Men from your own tribe. Silence dropped like a stone. Ayana stepped back slightly. That is not possible, Briggs continued. They believe Wyatt will give them land, weapons, power. Some of them already follow him. Her face darkened. Betrayal inside betrayal. Caleb exhaled slowly. So it's a mess on top of a mess, Briggs nodded. Welcome to the West. Ayana looked back toward the cage, toward her brother, then at Caleb. Her voice steadied. We go tonight. Caleb nodded. Yeah, Briggs added quietly. Once you go in, there's no coming back out clean. Caleb smirked faintly. Ain't been clean in a while. Night fell hard over Fort Hollow. The wind picked up, carrying dust through broken beams and empty corridors. Shadows stretched long and thin across the yard as lanterns flickered near guard posts, hidden behind the outer wall. Caleb, Ayana, and Briggs moved in silence. The hidden tunnel route brought them beneath the fort structure, dark, narrow, suffocating. Every step echoed faintly through old stone and rotting wood, until voices above. Wyatt wants the prisoner moved at sunrise. Caleb froze. Ayana's grip tightened. They waited, then moved. Again, the tunnel opened into a storage chamber beneath the fort. From here, they could hear everything above: the movement of boots, the shifting of weapons, the hum of men preparing for something big. Briggs pointed upward. Cage is central yard. You go now. You might catch them before relocation. Caleb nodded once. This is where we split, Briggs said. Caleb frowned. You're not coming? Briggs shook his head. My war ended a long time ago. This is yours now. Vanna stepped closer to him. Why help us? Briggs looked at her for a long moment. Because Wyatt Kane doesn't just destroy land, he said quietly. He destroys the truth. Then he turned and vanished into the tunnel shadows. Caleb exhaled. All right. Just us then. Ayanna looked at him. For a long moment. Neither spoke. Then she said softly, if I fail, do not let him take the map. Caleb shook his head. Ain't planning on letting you fail. She hesitated, then stepped closer than she ever had before. And if I do not return? Caleb met her eyes. Something unspoken passed between them, heavier than words, sharper than fear. Then I'll come get you, he said. Ayanna nodded once, and together, they moved, upward, into the heart of Fort Hollow. The yard exploded into chaos the moment they emerged. Gunfire, shout, men scrambling as Caleb fired first clean, controlled shots, dropping 2 guards instantly. Ayanna moved like lightning, cutting through confusion toward the cage. Intruders. Someone yelled. Wyatt's men poured in from every direction, but it was too late. Ayanna reached the cage. Dakota lifted his head weakly. Sister, he whispered. She shot the lock. The cage door swung open, but before she could pull him out, a slow clap echoed across the yard. Caleb turned sharply. Wyatt. Kane stood on the balcony above. Smiling. As if none of this surprised him at all. I was wondering when you'd show up, Wyatt called down. Ayanna froze. Wyatt's eyes locked onto her brother. Then her, then Caleb. And now? Wyatt said softly. We finish what your brother started. He raised his hand, and the entire fort erupted into war. But this time, Caleb didn't back down. Ayanna didn't hesitate, and Wyatt Kane finally realized he had created something he could not control.